But then there are, obviously, I'm sure there's people who have dieted several times, maybe been ensconced in that community, taken on that tradition, very, but then, had maybe had a hard time landing. What's the sweet spot, not in how much psychedelics you take, but you mentioned preparation. What's the sweet spot of intention for you? You see, the holistic health and integration is the intention. What is that sweet spot of, like, how localized are your intentions with psychedelics? Is that important rather than it being about, I'm going to go and save the world, or keep
Mm.
like what's the sweet spot of, like, setup and then integration afterwards? What do you want to see? What are the patterns when you see that it's been used healthily or being integrated healthily?
That's a good question. I mean, your intention, ultimately that's up to you. And, if you're somebody who's really passionate about making changes in the world, then sure, you can bring that intention in. But, I do think there's some wisdom in that kind of idea of clean up your own backyard before you start going to anyone else's, right? And that lesson is not specific to psychedelics. So in terms of the sweet spot, when I work with people, what tends to be the first thing that happens is we put the brakes on. People come to psychedelics really looking for this silver bullet, thinking that it's gonna, just suddenly change their life. And I think that, yeah, it's important to slow that right down, because they're not a silver bullet. They're not right for everyone. There are some people who probably don't need psychedelics and might even come out worse for wear. Some people are already so open, so, connected, or, they're kind of in a psychedelic state, if you will, already, through other practices or just by nature of their personality. And for them, it's kind of like, well, throwing psychedelics in the mix is probably just adding more chaos than what we really need.
Yeah, like
Um,
they might not be seeing the same visuals, like that, or depicting behind you, but nonetheless, the state is somewhat. You say, like, yeah, the state's somewhat the same. We don't need to get blown into that dimension a bit anymore.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and if they're sort of in a period of instability in their life, it's probably not always a good thing to be taking psychedelics when there's instability in your life, because they're kind of like they do add a little bit of chaos or entropy into the system. And for people who are stuck, really stuck, that can be great. But sometimes people who are already in the chaos, that can be not as helpful. But it's very personal, and it depends exactly on what we're talking about. But yeah, the sweet spot for me is to, yeah, put the brakes on and to encourage a person to really start just doing some quote unquote normal therapy, and I like the word mapping. Let's do some mapping together, right? Let's map, a bit about your personality. Let's map a little bit about your core beliefs. Let's do some somatic mapping. Like, let's look at how your nervous system regulates you in day-to-day life. How do you manage big experiences? What happens to you on a day-to-day level with your nervous system? And what tools do you have to resource yourself to come back to your body and to regulate the nervous system arousal, and map, what are your triggers and things like that. And maybe mapping some of your developmental history so that you've got this kind of sense of yourself. Because psychedelics can blow that open. They can also, like, show you parts of the map that you didn't know existed. But hopefully, if you've done some good preparation, you won't get too surprised. And it will make more sense to you.